Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Hey everybody, sorry about that little delay there. Apparently YouTube has decided to throw a little fit about something, so I hope everything's going to work out. Sorry about that, but welcome to the Modernize or Die CFML News Edition. It's episode 165 and September 27th, 2022, and yes, Brad did make it. He escaped the server room he was locked in last week and couldn't make it, so we got him this week.
I've got clients banging on the door, man. They're like, "Where are you, Brad? We need you."
Okay, so obviously, Brad and myself both work for Ortus Solutions, and that's the first thing we want to do is thank Ortus Solutions for making this podcast possible. So they're the makers of ColdBox, CommandBox, ForgeBox, TestBox, and plenty of other boxes out there. And a way that you guys can say thanks to Ortus Solutions for doing all the things they do is to like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. Help us reach for the stars, so please fork and star the repos that you work with, and there's a GitHub tool that Eric made, so you can basically just run this from inside your repo, and all the things that you're using from ForgeBox can be liked on GitHub. Also, if you listen to this podcast on your app or whatnot, leave a review. We like those reviews; they do help us. And then sign up for a free or paid account on CFCasts, which releases new content like every week. And we have some cool stuff on the Box Life store if you want to get some cool t-shirts. And then we have books available. And so the 102 ColdBox HMVC Quick Tips and Tricks is on Gumroad. And they also have the Modern CFML book. So Modern CFML in 100 minutes, you can get that as well. But we want to also thank our Patreon supporters, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast, because they're providing actually 100% of the support for this podcast, and then some extra, which is going towards all of our ForgeBox hosting. Right, Brad? I mean, how many packages? You did this stuff at Into the Box in the keynote about how many millions of packages we have, and the S3 bills must be pretty big. So we're about 30%.
I don't know if I'd say millions, but yes, we have a growing list of packages. And the ForgeBox storage approach, where we just magically whisk your package away to a private ForgeBox bucket, is the growing option and popularity. But we foot that bill for you. So thank you to the Patreon supporters who help us foot that bill for the community.
Yep, so we're paying 33% of that. So we do thank you. We appreciate you. Really appreciate it. Okay, so next up we have our news. So a little news for us. We just want to touch on the CF Summit. For those watching, I'm wearing the CF Summit shirt. So next week is CF Summit, and one of the sessions, Dave Ferguson and Matt Gifford are going to be doing an Ask Me Anything session where you can ask them basically anything Cold Fusion related. So they have a they have a form up on Google that you can basically fill out, and they'll answer your questions on the stage live. And the cool thing is that you just basically link your repo. If you got a reproducible case or some question you want to have, you can actually just throw it out there, and they'll answer it. And obviously, CF Summit next week. I'm excited. You're excited, Brad?
I'm super excited, Gavin. I'm talking about message queues, so I don't know why I wouldn't be excited. But I mean, it's the first CF Summit since COVID. I haven't. Well, I've flown into Vegas, but I haven't actually done anything in Vegas since the last CF Summit. So, looking forward to seeing Mark Takata, who I saw him last time at CF Summit, but he wasn't the Cold Fusion evangelist back then, and the whole Cold Fusion team that's coming in. I've got people on Slack that are like, "I'm gonna see you in a couple of weeks in CF Summit." So it's a pretty exciting time to be able to get back into that saddle, if you will.
Yep, for sure. So we'll be there. But also coming up thick and fast is Hacktoberfest 2023. So I've got the details this week. Last week we reminded everybody. This week we're basically giving you the details. So previous years, I think you had to have 5 pull requests, and they didn't even have to be accepted. But now you have to have 4 pull requests or merge requests accepted between October 1st and October 31st to complete Hacktoberfest. And it's the first 40,000 participants, maintainers, and contributors who complete the Hacktoberfest can, elect to receive a prize, either a planted tree in their name in the digital ocean forest, or the Hacktoberfest 2022 T-shirt, which I love their shirts. Probably the best shirts out there. They're almost as good as the JFrog ones for quality too. So
yeah, everybody loves a nice, comfortable shirt. I want to wear that anywhere.
yeah. My wife wants to steal them all the time, for sure. So, but yeah, so Hacktoberfest, you can sign up already, so you can go fill out the form and register, and then we'll put the Hacktoberfest topics on some stuff. And if you are doing a pull request during the month and we don't have Hacktoberfest on it, let us know. We'll slam it on there for you. We want to support you guys. One of the cool things, though, they actually have non-code options this year too, so you can actually do design work or evangelism stuff, and that can count too. So I'm not sure how that adds up, but there is information on that too. So if you guys write a bunch of blog posts about ColdBox or something, or CommandBox, which you should be, let us know, and then we might be able to give you credit for that too. So that's kind of cool. So let's move on to new releases. So Lucee has a new release candidate, Lucee 5.3.10. So
yes, they do. Unfortunately, they cut off the release candidate at build 79, and my pull request with some query fixes went into build 80. So,
oops.
and the other pull request that I sent at the same time didn't get merged because unrelated tests failed. So I'm like, come on. So hopefully my query things will make it into the final Lucee 5.3.10 version. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in 5.3.10, which was like the version I didn't think we were gonna have originally, because when 5.3.9 came out, that was gonna be like the last 5.3 version of Lucee, and when 5.3.8 came out, that was gonna be the last 5.3 version of Lucee. But yeah, still stuff going on there.
Yeah, as Charlie said, missed it by that much.
I know, right? Scott asked what new things are going into queries. Actually, no features, just some how do you describe it? The short version. So the Lucee query has like the 2 implementations, right? The native query, and if that errors, then it falls back on the crappy HSQL DB version. But there's a handful of things that error in the native version that like error for good reason, like the SQL's just like you don't have the right parameters or the right type. So there's no sense to even bother falling back, or you're trying to divide by 0, right? Like I can guarantee you the HSQL version of query is also not going to be able to divide by 0. So we improved that with the way the exceptions were handled. So there's a whole list of exceptions in the ticket that basically, if any of these things happen, we just blow up right away, skip the whole, oh, let me try again thing, which just kind of makes for a cleaner experience. It provides better error messages. But anyway, yeah, it's nothing too sexy, but it is nice.
Yeah, that makes sure. And what else was I gonna say? Oh, I'm wondering if that has all their experimental features. The last few weeks we've been talking about like query listeners and mail listeners and all these listener things that they've been throwing around. So they're meant to be an experimental version. So I wonder if they're actually in there. So
originally I thought those were all going to be 6.0 features, but I actually don't know anymore.
They said they were going to be definitely 6.0 features, but they were in the experimental phase in the 5.3. So I'm not sure if they actually made this release candidate or they're just playing with it and it's not one of the ones that got released. But I'm like, they sounded interesting. So
Poppy's read some docs. I mean, they were interesting like 4 years ago when they announced them all at CF Summit.
Oh,
not CF Summit, CF Camp.
okay.
Just to kind of drop that little chestnut. Been a little while. I've been waiting on those to drop, and they're still experimental. But yeah, that's a good question though. I'm gonna say, Poppy's just updated the documentation to add some stuff about query listeners, and I wanted to see if I could find the link to that because I figured it would probably say, oh, here we go. Here's the post on. I'm always snarky, John Farrar. come out of the box that way. Okay, yeah. So Zach said available as an experimental feature in Lucee 5.3, officially supported in 6.0. So I'm guessing it's probably in the 5.3.10 release candidate. What I'm not sure is if you have to flip a flag to enable it,
Mm.
or if it's just there and like, is it there to use and they just don't tell you about it, or do you have to flip it on? Yeah, this thread here on the discourse forum doesn't actually appear to specify how you use it as an experimental feature.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to dive into that. But I thought it was pretty cool that they're doing those types of things. Just a little different, some new features coming out, not just same old. Okay, well, next up, let's talk about webinars, meetups, and workshops. And so this week we actually have one this Thursday. So for those keeping count, like me, 299 online CF meetup number 299. Charlie Earhart's going to be doing using Adobe's CF setup tool, manage CF admin settings for any version. And he does mention in there CF config and everything else, but they released the CF setup tool back in 2020. But the interesting thing is that it doesn't just work for 2021. So it actually works for any version of Cold Fusion. So in his talk, he's going to be talking about how to use it with Docker, without Docker, and comparing, what you can do with CF setup, and obviously comparing to CF config, and then the old CAR, the old school ways to do settings
Car
and everything
files.
else. CAR files, yep. And so, talks about why you might want to use one or the other, or why not use both, or, just a lot of exploration into that. And as he mentions, a lot of people have heard of used different ones, but there's a lot of documentation out there, and there's a lot of stuff that you may not know. So he's going to be talking about that this Thursday, September 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific. So
We should start a rumor that the car files were originally named after Charlie Earhart. Think that rumor would work?
I
Seems
don't know.
plausible.
Yeah, it might be. But yeah, so that's going to be going on this Thursday. So go check that out. It's up on meetup.com. So I will share the link here in the chat. And he says he won't spend much time on CF config, of course, but that's what Charlie's saying in the chat. But he'll just, in comparison and context of that, he will. So towards the end. And Adobe even named their event system vendor after him as well. Yeah, I know. It used to throw me too, the Carosoft stuff. Yeah.
I don't know what event system vendor means.
Remember they used to have the Carosoft, CARA soft?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not them either. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that in forever.
Yeah. And it did confuse people at one point. I'm sure I fell for it at one point too. So yeah, so sign up for that one on the meetup.com, and as usual, Charlie will have a great one then, and then episode 300 should be coming soon, so I guess we'll have to see. Okay, next up, we also have Adobe Workshops and Webinars. We had a couple last week, so Damon Bruin did a Cold Fusion one-day workshop, and then Mark Takata did his building custom Adobe Connect pods with CF 2021. And we got a couple more scheduled for November and December. So building native mobile apps with Adobe Cold Fusion and Monaco.io with Mark. And then he'll also be doing a holiday special with a preview of Cold Fusion 2023 to finish out the year. So I think it's going to be a busy year for them. Obviously, October they're taking a break because we're at CF Summit. Okay, let's move on to CFCasts. So CFCast.com, our premier learning site for Cold Fusion. We've got a lot of content out there. We did release the Ortus webinar, the Into the Box recap that myself, Brad, and John did. For all of those who missed Into the Box or maybe were there, it's kind of nice to sort of get the recap there. So you guys can check that up on CFCasts. For everyone who is a ticket holder for ITB, all the videos have been released on the site. And if you're just a normal subscriber to CFCast, don't worry, you'll be getting those videos. They'll be coming out in the 12 Days of Christmas in December. So we have a little exclusive for those who paid for tickets. And then we have some ForgeBox mods of the week. And VS Code hint tip trick of the week videos as well that get posted. So what do we have coming soon on CFCast, Brad? You got anything coming out? I mean, Command Box, you got to have some videos sometime, right?
I haven't made anything personally in a while, but I do see a list of things here in the show notes. It says more ForgeBox and VS Code podcast snippet videos. I do like those. That way people don't have the time to watch the full hour-long podcast and get the little snippets, little good stuff. Looks like there's a Boxify third-party library thing from some crazy guy named Gavin. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
More Coalbox Elixir content from Eric. Getting started with Content Box series from Daniel. And then we're also going to have the Into the Box videos released in December for those people who did not purchase Into the Box tickets. So if you purchase tickets, you can get them right now. But if you were not a ticket holder for Into the Box, you'll be able to access those in December.
Yep, so CFCast.com, go check that out. And again, lots of content in production. Well, we're producing it. It's not live yet. That always gets me confused sometimes when, something's in production versus it's getting produced.
Yeah, you're right. When it's like video content production means like you're still producing it, like it's not done. That's not funny.
Yeah.
It's like when you turn the AC up. Did you make it warmer or colder? Nobody knows.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, great stuff. Go check it out, cfcast.com. Okay, conference time. So, what do we have next week, Brad?
What do we have next week? Well, I believe we have one Adobe Cold Fusion Summit in the Mirage in Las Vegas, Nevada, Gavin. So that's October 3rd and 4th. I've got my plane tickets. I've got my my flight scheduled. I've got my hotel. I'm ready to go.
Yep, so we'll be there Sunday. So we'll be there and available. Come check out the booth. Obviously, we'll have an Ortus booth. We'll be hanging out there when we're not presenting and attending some of the sessions as well. But we have
Gavin's the booth babe, by the way.
Oh, I thought that was Eric.
Oh,
I better tell Eric. Sorry.
you guys can fight over who's the booth babe. It's just not me.
Yeah. So, but we'll have Brad, myself, Eric, Luis, Daniel Garcia. We have a lot of people there. We also have Edgardo and Majo. Maria Jose will be there as well at the booth. So if you have questions, we got lots of stickers. So come check us out. We'll have a lot of cool stuff there. So come say hi. We'll be at the party as well, and the Adobe party at the pool on Monday night. So come check us out, chat with us a little bit. And if you guys are a Patreon, come say hi in person. It's always great to hang out with the Patreons in person when we can. So let us know. And obviously, if you haven't got your ticket, they're still available. And then they also have the 5th, the day after, they have their training. So if you're looking at doing the certified training, it's the new one, the Adobe Certified Professional Adobe Cold Fusion Certification. That is on October the 5th. So go check it out. And again, I should share my screen for those who are watching, because we do have a pretty cool little list of sessions up there. So if we go to the agenda, you see we get breakfast. So
very important.
Very important. And then the keynotes. And then Daniel Garcia starts off the day. We have Chase Cabrera and Kevin Knight. Yep. And then me again. So you're right after me. You're in
I
ballroom
literally
E.
haven't even looked to see what my session is.
Yeah, your session is, I think, right after lunch or right before lunch.
So it's the first day?
Yeah, you're the first day. Ortus is basically back to back to back to back on the first day.
It's kind of nice just to get it over with, because then it's not hanging over your head the rest of the conference.
Yep. See, they always put me right before lunch because they know I'm going to go like 30 minutes over. So I'm right before lunch in E. You're right after lunch in E. So.
Oh man, after lunch can be a rough time. Everybody overeats and they come in and they're all like full from lunch and they're just ready for a nap.
I know, and you're up against Pete Freitag and Michael Hayes. So.
Ooh. Oh dang.
Yeah.
So are there 3 tracks? Is that what we got going on?
3 tracks by the look of it. Yep. So we got at your time we have leveraging AI cognitive services via Cold Fusion.
Man, see, I want to go to that one.
Messages queues with RabbitMQ, and then taming the top 25 most dangerous software weaknesses with Pete Freitag.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm gonna have an empty room, man. I need to have like lions jumping through flaming hoops or something to get people into my message queue session.
Yeah, it might be a tough one. So, but yeah, a lot of good stuff. And right after you in the same room is Alpine. So basically, E looks like it's the Ortus room. Is Daniel in E? No, he's not. So we go. Oh, Daniel's in the big one. He's in ballroom B and C. Guess they're expecting a lot of people for that one. No pressure, Daniel. But yeah, so basically, the end of day one, we'll be done with our sessions. All the Ortus people are speaking day one, and then we can relax at the party, and then enjoy the rest of the time. So that is CF Summit. AWS Awesome Day online conference. So there's a 3-day online conference, October 20th on Thursday, and basically a 3-hour jumpstart getting you into AWS, learning about everything in there. So it'll be pretty neat. So I'll share the link for that one if you want to find out more, get up to speed with AWS. What is it? How you could use it? And of course, Brian Class will be at CF Summit talking about AWS stuff, so you should always be there. Into the Box Latam. We have a little bit more information for you. We believe it's going to be December 7th, so I think they've locked that down. They're going to be launching the new site very soon. And Brad, you want to tell us why everybody should be interested in signing up for Dev Nexus next year? Because the super early bird sales on sale to October 29th. So if you want to save half price, you got basically a week and a half to do it.
Yes. A quick note on the Into the Box Latam, though, just in case anybody's not familiar with it, that is our conference in Latin America, specifically sunny San Salvador. So that's down in El Salvador. So let any of your friends in South America or Central America know about that one. But yes, Dev Nexus is already got their super early bird out, which is pretty cool. They had their call for papers open. I'm trying to think, who was it that I just talked to the other day that said they were planning on going to that?
I think Eric's going to be there. I think John's trying to go there again. And then down, so we got a few of our team traveling, and then...
Right. I mean, we brought like 5 people from Ortus last year. The Fusion Reactor guys are usually there. I've been trying to get Mark Takata from Adobe to go out there. Unfortunately, he didn't have the budget to do it last year with all the COVID crazy stuff.
Yeah, and then I know that a lot of our friends in South America are looking to attend there. A lot of people are excited because it's a lot closer, easy to get to. And then I know that they had some pretty good speakers in the area too. There was like some AWS representatives that were speaking last time, and so I know they're working on trying to get some more local speakers from big companies. So.
Yep.
It sounds really exciting. It'll be really cool. So, back to Dev Nexus then, Brad.
Yes, Dev Nexus. So, right. And we definitely a great conference, just as far as a general programming conference. You know, it's mostly in the Java space, but it touches all sorts of technologies, and it has vendor booths from, every major technology company you can imagine, IBM, Google, GitHub, Heroku, all of them are there. And so, like I said, we had a group of people from Ortus there last year. When I mentioned Fusion Reactor, I meant this is the conference that they were at as well. And so it's just got a lot of good sessions. And if you're looking for a conference to maybe try to speak at that's not full Fusion, I definitely recommend submitting a talk. Luis and I have spoken at Dev Nexus several times, and I submit Cold Fusion talks every year, and they completely ignore them. We'll never accept them, but they have accepted talks of Luis's and mine on message queues, agile development, secure password hashing, basic general purpose, talks on programming methodologies and things. So Dev Nexus is a fun conference because it's got all the sponsors in the world. There's usually about 2,000 people that go there. So it's something that's fun to look into. It's in Atlanta, which isn't too hard to get in and out of. And they usually also have a bunch of workshops as well in person that are like, Docker, Kubernetes, or, there's all sorts of interesting stuff. And like the actual Oracle Java development team is there. So you can actually talk to the engineers that are working on Java, which is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, and just so you know, you can go click on the previous conferences, and it'll give you like a breakdown, an archive of all the presentations. So you see the 4 keynotes, all the workshops they're working on, and they have just tons and tons of different things. So cloud stuff, cloud infrastructure, JVM frameworks, agile architecture, best practices, security, tools, web and JavaScript. So there's just a ton of stuff in here. So I think this was Luis's, and so you can get information about it. And some of them even up.
Yeah, Luis did Alpine last year. Yep.
Yep. And so
Yeah.
some of them even have them up. Like I actually found Luis's one up on YouTube, so we added it to that. So if you look at recordings, they actually have some of the stuff in here. But yeah, so it's just kind of interesting that they have a lot of content. You know, they've made it all available, and if you want to check out and see who was there last year, you can find out by looking on their site. So
Yeah, my session didn't get recorded last year. I was in a smaller room and they didn't have any of the equipment there to record it. So
I wonder how they figured that out. Yeah,
I mean, because they literally have like a dozen or so simultaneous tracks going on at DevNexus because it's such a big conference, and so they didn't have the recording equipment in like every single room. But anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a big conference. I was scrolling through that list going, man, this thing is just huge. So you could, let's say, there's plenty of content for you. You know, if you did go 50% off, it's a pretty good deal for a conference. So, of course, you have to do that before this call for speakers closes. That's how the super early birds work.
Yep, get it in now.
Yep. And
so speaking of conferences, how about Into the Box 2023? Let's do it again.
Yep.
Run it back.
So middle of May, so hopefully we get a bit of time, no clashes, before the end of school craziness as well. No have to worry about summer vacations and everything interfering, or the back to school madness that we had this time. So we'll be doing a call for speakers pretty soon here, actually. So start thinking about your topics.
We're sliding it forward about 4 months to get it back into that May time slot, which means you need to be talking to your boss now about getting your budget for it for the next year. It's not going to be 12 months until it happens again. It's going to be a shorter year. So we're going to be kicking into the box season pretty soon.
Yep, and hoping right after that there'll be a CF Camp 2023 in summertime, so we can plan our summer vacations to Europe, right, Brad? Go tiki touring all around.
I know. I haven't been to Europe since the last CF Camp, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yep. So. A lot of great things coming, but again, CF Summit next week. And for the podcast, just so you know, we're going to try and do one live from the booth in CF Summit next week. So we'll see how that works.
We've done that before. It works okay.
Yep, so we're going to try and do that. We'll just see how loud it is there and how good the Wi-Fi is. But we'll try and do that live next week.
If we do it sometime in the evening when the sponsor area is empty, it wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, so... We might try and just at least tune in at the 10 o'clock next week. It'll be right after the keynote. We'll have to see, give you a little breakdown on what the keynote said and everything. And we'll see, because I know we got a lot of after activities, but we'll give you guys an announcement, so don't worry. But we're going to still try and provide something for you from the conference next week, since almost all of us are going to be there. So, okie dokie. Blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. First one up. Is this Brad Wood guy going off again? What is he talking about?
Yeah, I added that to the show notes right as we were starting. So,
tell us about it.
It's a quick tweet that I just sent out. You might remember that I added the support for mod CFML in the command box a couple versions ago, and that allows you to have a single command box server which services multiple web routes sitting behind Apache or IIS with bond code or Nginx. That is looking at the host name, incoming and saying this is the web route it needs to be, which is a huge thing for people that want to, host on production with command box. They want to have a, 15, 20, 100 web routes. And so one of the big missing features there was with CFconfig, there wasn't a great way to automatically load the configuration into all the individual Lucee contexts. So I added some cool features last night to CFconfig, which allows you a nice little convention in your server.json file, where you can have a CFconfig JSON for the server level settings, and then you can also specify a CFconfig.json file for each of the individual Lucee web contexts that are being mapped to through all the mod CFML stuff. So that allows you to get that server out of the box. So John asked for the link. If you click on the tweet right there that Gavin just put in the chat, inside my tweet is a link to the docs that shows what that looks like. So anyway, it's a tiny little feature, but it's super useful for people that want to rely on the mod CFML support, but they still also want to have CFconfig automatically importing that stuff. And when you update versions of Lucee, CFconfig will also copy over all the settings from all of your individual Lucee web contexts over to all of the Lucee web contexts on the new server as well, which was missing prior to last night. So just some nice little features to make that finally work the way it should have worked in the beginning, but I didn't have the time originally to implement all that, so I finally got a chance to think through that. Let me know if you run into any bugs, because I do occasionally write them.
Only occasionally. Yeah, for sure. So, cool. Next up, we have one from Ben Adele. And so this is considering control flow and transient data relationships in Cold Fusion. And so this one was interesting. He talks about how he breaks up his app. It's kind of like MVC-ish. He has a controller, and the controller is sort of a normal controller sort of thing, handles input and requests, and then workflow is sort of like the next level down, which passes stuff down to services, and then his gateways actually do the data persistence and everything else. And so, because he has sort of a layered, strong separation of concerns, his raw data is abstracted away somewhat and whatnot. So he's trying to figure out the best way to handle things, where basically he's just trying to send a birthday reminder, getting a user ID. So he'd go out and get the user, and he comes back as like a struct essentially. And so basically he would say, hey, get the nickname for the user, and then basically if it doesn't throw an error, then we'll set that as preferred name. But if it doesn't have a nickname, then it was going to throw an error, and we'll use their normal name or whatnot. And so he's sort of figuring out different ways to handle this. He's like, well, I don't really like this, and he talks about try catching in here. Seems like it's not the right place for it. And then he talks about doing something where maybe have a null check. So if it has a name, it returns the nickname. Otherwise, it returns null, and you can do basically like a null check here and pass it on. And then he talks about doing something where you pass it back as a struct and check to see if the struct is empty, and if the struct is empty, then you do one thing or the other. Just different ways to approach it. And he really didn't like the struct approach. But anyway, so he sort of went through the different things, using an array and everything, and basically, just working through. And in the end, he had something where basically, using the record count inside of the get nickname helper, basically check the record name and then pass back a struct, and if it has an exist flag of true or false, and if it exists, then you can check the value. And so now he gets the user, then he uses the nickname service to get the nickname for the user, and then if the nickname exists, then he uses the value, otherwise uses the name. And so just work through the whole flow. I thought it was interesting, but I've been on a kick, so I put a really big response in here. So
I'm curious what you said, because I already have thoughts.
Yeah. Well, basically, I'm like, because the first thing was Chris said, why not just use a get preferred name function, which always return either the nickname or the name, and and so Ben said, well, you eventually gotta, you have to have that logic somewhere or whatever, and basically. He's like, well, that logic should be centralized in one place. That way you can get rid of the try catch, and it always handles the right way. And so I'm like, yeah, that makes a good point, And so I've been reading all this clean code and clean architecture book and everything. And so I said, sorry, it's a long response. But basically I'm like, yeah, we should really encapsulate that type of logic in the entity where the data and the behavior for the entity is there, so you're not duplicating the logic everywhere else, And so, long story short, I said that it should basically have a helper that does it. But then I also said, why don't you use something like Mementifier? So get Memento. So get user entity, because he doesn't actually have entities. And then get Memento to get the ID, the email, the preferred name. The preferred name will be retrieved with a get preferred name. And that's all you need. You don't need to have all the extra stuff. But, but yeah, that logic should be inside the user entity, because it should know how its business rules work.
Well, it depends on if you want to default it in the same way every time.
Well, that's the thing.
Um,
That's why if you have a preferred name, not get nickname, because the nickname would be a certain thing. So if you get the preferred
yeah.
name, but
I mean, my first thought is I think Ben's a little too afraid of nulls. Like, I think that's, I mean, if you look at most languages, and I get it, nulls are also the Achilles heel of a lot of languages. But
yep.
I mean, most languages would say this method returns null if there is no data, and null means, yeah, there was nothing. Or, I mean,
Hmm.
make it an empty string if you really want to be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's that bad. And I mean, I get it. You're going to have to check for null, but like, there will be an if statement somewhere that will check for something.
And that's
Period.
what he was saying.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get away from it. Null to me is like a million times better than trying to wrap it in like structs or arrays. But I'm really surprised nobody has mentioned just using an optional here.
Well,
Right?
actually, I was thinking that this is essentially
Because
an optional, but
well, yeah, I mean, so like Java has optionals. Guess what? Cold Fusion has a library that Luis wrote called CB optional, which is basically a Cold Fusion version of a Java optional. And an optional is what you get back when you want to call a method that may or may not find what you're looking for, but you don't want to deal with null. You get back an optional, which is more or less the same as a struct version, except for its objects, right? And so
hmm
the optional has some methods like did you actually find it, right? Okay, give me the thing you found. Or, hey, if it's null, default it to this. It just kind of encapsulates those checks for you, and so it turns into a bit more of a fluent API. But to me, yeah, an optional seems like the more obvious thing. But, I mean, you could also just make it like way simpler. Again, it depends on where you want to do the defaulting. I mean, you could also just have, like, if this were Lucee, if Misha was writing this code, there would be a default value that would be passed in, and when it was null, it would just use the default value. Um,
yep, you could do that
but I
too,
mean,
and get nickname and then pass a default for it. You know.
right, assuming that the code calling that method knows what the default value should be.
Hmm.
Maybe you want it to be different on a per basis or whatever. But yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of different design patterns there. I kind of like the optional as a way to avoid nulls, though I would be scared of relying too heavily on it in Cold Fusion if this was something that you were doing like thousands of times per request, just because of the overhead of, creating an entire CFC instance to wrap the result of a method that may or may not be null. Unfortunately, that could add up a bit more in Cold Fusion than it would in Java. But
Yeah, and that's the thing. And eventually, if you're using an optional, then you still have to worry about putting the, if it's this or that inside your code.
right, yeah,
And
you still have
again,
the if statement. It's just now it's not in as null check. It's a method that you call. I mean, yeah, you don't get away from it.
yeah, and
Well,
that's the thing is,
it might not
if
it
it's
might not be
empty
an if
string,
statement.
that's the thing is, if
Well,
it is an empty string in Cold Fusion, is that considered null or not?
well, that depends on your
Yeah,
app. The question
exactly.
becomes: do you need to differentiate between if the value has legitimately never been set before versus explicitly set to an empty string? If you don't need to differentiate between that, then who cares? Just make it an empty string, and it'll always be an empty string, whether it was set that way explicitly or whether it was not set.
Yep.
If your application needs to know has the user ever saved this is important, then you need to have that value, possibly an explicit empty string, and no, really, I've never set this, which is usually where null comes in.
Yeah.
But
Exactly. And I thought it was interesting because, like I said, I've been on that whole kick of doing more clean code and thinking more about architecturally and stuff. And so, I mean, I always use helpers whenever I can, whether it's in the service, and that's why I mentioned in my response to is like, I know you're not using an object here, but you could make a service method that took the data and then manipulated it to the rules that the user service wants to enforce. But yeah. So anyway, again, a million ways to do it. What's the best way? Lots of different ways to do it. So, moving on. So we also had something from Bruin. He was talking about quick create users or create issues. And so this is a kind of a weird one. I've actually run into this one before. So when you create something in Quick, you create an object. So if you do an instance of Quick Company, oh, that all moved. And then you basically get an instance and create it, passing a struct. It'll create the struct, it'll save it, and then what it does is it uses the get primary key or get the identity key or basically whenever it generated it, the generated key, it puts it back into the object for you. So if you do the ocompany.getID, you'll get it back. The interesting thing they ran into was it was coming back as a string. But if you do a refresh on that quick entity, it'll do another query, go to the database, and then come back. And when it comes back, it's actually an integer. And so if you're using something which cares if it's an integer or if it's a query, I'm sorry, if it's a string, then obviously that matters. And that would actually break some APIs, because if the ID comes back and it's a string and it's expecting a number, sometimes you'll get validation issues and everything. And so I think it actually comes, when I did some looking into it, it came from the get generated ID in Lucee returns a string. And so that was the issue that comes. And so basically, what I did is I think I did a setter on the ID, which cast it to an int. Is the way I got around it. But maybe that's something we can actually include in quick to say, if this is if this field is an integer, we should always make sure that we cast it to an integer, or try to, when we're getting it out of the database or something. So
it seems like that could warrant a Lucee ticket to type the generated ID based on the underlying column type of the table. Because if it's a unique identifier, it's got to be a string. But if it's an auto incrementing int, feels like it should come back as a proper int in Cold Fusion.
So Ville's actually saying the incremental key in quick generates a string. So okay, so it's generating one itself. I thought the incremental key in quick let the database generate it and then returned it. So maybe I was misreading there, Ville. And he already promised Eric that he would solve it, and easy enough to solve. But yeah, I ran into it with the actual database was generating it, and I still had the same problem. And so I just put a setter that cast it, for my quick entity. But anyway, it was good. Thanks for sharing that, Ville. And of course, getting feedback to the right person is important too, so Eric knows about it. And you're going to fix it, so that can be one of your Hacktoberfest tickets. So congratulations. So
yeah, I need to figure out what tickets I'm going to do for Hacktoberfest. Maybe I should have held off on those Lucee query queue or Q pull requests.
Yeah. And I thought about the same thing with a bug I found yesterday in ColdBox, but I'm like, no, I need to get it fixed right away. So I just did it. I'm sure there'll be something else I'll find. So, but next up we had the CF Summit 2022 schedule from Nolan. So he's going to be there. So he's talking about what his schedule is, what sessions he's going to be attending. And sorry he didn't pick yours, Brad, or mine, or Daniel Garcia's, man.
Well, he already saw us all into the box, so he's going to get some non-order stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. But it looks like it will be a good amount of sessions he's going to be attending in there, and we had a lot of fun to catch up with Nolan. So we're going to try and get another breakfast. So I'm sure we'll chit chat some more there. But if you're interested in what he's looking at and why, there you go. I like those little session sort of recaps people do before they go. And then obviously Nolan usually is pretty detailed in his reports after too, which I like. So Brad, what do you think about Lucee's idea of cache within instance, along with cache, lines of cache request for functions? Did you see this one?
I actually didn't read it. I saw it several times, and I saw some people replied to it, and I never actually went and read it.
Yeah.
Cached within instance.
Yeah, so this was interesting because,
for a function inside of a CFC?
Yeah, so, sometimes you get data, it's an expensive fetch or whatever, and so he was like, you could basically put it, programmatically, it'll just say, hey, cache this within the instance. And the funny thing is like, Ben's like, well, most of my CFCs are in the application scope anyway, so there's no real difference between the instance or the component being cached. It's already there. And Adam Cameron said, he says, it's conflating what the function does with how it's being used. So he doesn't like the fact that all of the functions will behave that way no matter what thing is calling it. And if it's a transient and you put something in there for the instance, isn't that like just putting it in a variable anyway? So what's the point of doing that? I
don't know if I really understand that. I mean, there could still be usefulness in a transient if it's something you're going to call the method on 1,000 times. I mean, I think when I want to do that, usually I would just have a getter that, I would have a CF property for it, right? And my getter would just set the property if it wasn't set, and if it was set, it would just return the property, and that would effectively be cached within the instance.
Yep.
I don't see anything immediately terribly wrong with the idea, but I think it begs a few questions that I'm sure you can find answers to, but you would need to answer. I mean, so what if UDF doesn't live inside of a CFC? Should that be a compilation error, right? Keep in mind the fact that a UDF can be declared anywhere and injected into a CFC at a later date. So should it really be a compilation error, right? Or should it be a runtime error? And what if you take a UDF from one CFC and you inject it into another CFC? Does the cache data follow it, or is it specific to whatever CFC it's living inside of? I mean, I think all those questions could be answered, but I think all of them would need to be answered in order to implement it. I don't know. It's not a terrible idea. I don't know if I necessarily follow what Adam is saying, what the function does versus how it's being used.
Well, that happens sometimes where
I don't think the user cares, right? I mean, if I'm just some code calling a method, I don't give a flip if that method has some internal caching mechanism. That's up to that method, right?
Yeah, but
fully encapsulated.
If I want a fresh version of it, then I've got to go now.
Whoa! Whoa! Why do you get to decide? You're not the object, right? You just call the method. The method does what it wants. Oh, I want a fresh version. I mean, I'm being silly here, right? But like, I mean, isn't that the point of encapsulation and object-oriented programming? Is here's the method, here's the API, you call it. No. I don't care what you think you want. I encapsulate that. I cache. I decide when to clear the cache. You just call the method. I'll give you the data. So I mean, in that world, the caller shouldn't care, right? I mean, the caching is purely a mechanism of the encapsulation of that data, quote unquote, in theory.
Yeah, well, I understand, but I mean, because he did obviously, offer some options for purging and everything else. You could purge that data or all the data, and that because sometimes you need to do that. Like when we're on a blog and we update a blog post, it's cached by default. So your system has to be smart enough to, blow away the cache when you edit it. Which usually, if you're editing a blog, it does. But what if your blog contains, like in CMS through Content Box, we have content store items. So if we update a speaker in a content store item, which is used in a content store session, which is used in a page, now that we're 4 levels away from the way the blog works, we need to tell it, hey, we need an updated version of this page. We need to basically blow stuff away. So we need to control it because the system's not smart enough to handle all of that. So it doesn't know that something that it's caching is something changed that it's relying on. So sometimes you need to say, hey, I need a new version of this, or,
those are two different concerns, though. I mean, I get it. Cache invalidation is a thing, right? But I don't see how that's mixing how it's used. But I mean, if the code says I want to cache this function, and it's now the onus is on that code or the developer who writes it to decide how they're going to invalidate it. The caller still shouldn't care.
Yeah, but if I'm in the admin where I'm editing stuff, whenever I'm making a call from there, I should always want a fresh version of it. I don't want it to be cached every time. On the front end of the site, it's a different concern, like you said, and I want to be caching it because I'm using it. But it's, again, Adam's just saying you shouldn't necessarily couple it. And so sometimes it happens where, you have to basically fight it. So every time you want to make that call, you got to purge it, then you got to get it. You got to purge it, then you got to get it. So if it's tied into that method.
So here's the thing. I don't see how that relates to cache within instance. All of those arguments could be applied to cache within anything, right?
Yeah,
Let's
totally.
say you're storing it in Redis. We could still have a conversation of how do you invalidate, but that's not a critique of Ben, or is this Ben or Zach's? So you asked, Zach. This isn't necessarily a critique specific to cache within an instance. This is just how do I invalidate cache, which is something we always deal with.
Yeah, but it's just linking it to this is the function that does it, and so now I have no control of when it should handle it, when it should.
But as the caller, you shouldn't need to have control. If the data is being updated, presumably through a mutator on that same object, then that mutator should be responsible for wiping whatever cache it needs to do, right?
Maybe. I mean, like I said, it's one of those things. There's a reason I don't use caching on functions in ColdBox, because I usually get a SIP around it so I can control it better. And we use that in a lot of places. And so there's pros and cons to each approach, for sure. It depends on what it is, too. Like, it might be handy for sometimes not to have to worry about doing it. It's an easy way. But anyway, that's just one of the points he mentioned. And like I said, if someone put caching on every single thing that I wanted to touch, I would be mad that I had to make 2 requests every time I wanted a clean version of it, instead of saying, this call never needs a cached version, so I always want to get the uncached version. And other places I may want to control it more. But
yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I just think discussions of cache invalidation are really neither here nor there. They're all beside the point as far as whether or not this idea makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand what Adam's saying. Just stick at the variable scope and be done with it, right? That's what I do. But I
But then
mean,
again, yeah, I
it's
mean,
boilerplate. The whole point was, what if I want to avoid some boilerplate? Sure. I
yeah.
mean,
And I guess in your code review, you just make sure that you don't let that pass if that's something that's going to affect you. So yeah,
yeah. I mean,
having an option is great. I mean, I don't mind having the option.
I wouldn't vote against this. I'd
Yeah.
say, yeah, I could see a use case for that. Beware, there's dragons.
Yeah.
Anytime
Hey,
you
anytime you cast, there's always a dragon. That's the story of the day. Okay, so we've learned one thing today. So, anyways,
good time.
okay, yep, good chat. Herding cat situation, you might be right there, but thanks for the input, Charlie. Okay, so another one from Ben Adele. Key conflicts on insert. This was interesting. So he's talked about key conflicts before, and doing stuff, but on inserts, I guess if you have an issue inside the query, it still auto increments the value in MySQL, which
I didn't read this post. Is he talking about an insert that gets rolled back?
so I think he was talking about when you have the create token or ignore. I think it goes down to insert ignore into token where the value is that, and so essentially if the token already exists, it's going to error, so the insert ignore just skips it. But he's saying that because the insert already generates it, the key still increments like you did it. So it basically the key is incremented, then it actually tries to execute it, and it says no, that this value is already exists, and so it errors, and the key is still updated. It doesn't revert the key, which makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the insert ignore into syntax, so
Yeah, I thought that was a really good thing for getting around certain use cases, and then I realized no, any error at all will throw, and so I guess when you insert ignore, I thought it was just on like duplication or like constraints or whatever, but I found that some databases, if you do an insert ignore and you like typo a field name or something, it'll just error and it'll just catch it because it ignores all errors, not just the one you're expecting, which that was not good. But yeah, insert ignore is like a try catch, as Scott said. So, but I didn't like the fact that it caught everything.
Is MySQL the only database that does that, or is like Postgres has that as well?
They have more. I think Postgres gives you more details. You can say, insert ignore on these things, and if that's the case, you can do an update and stuff too.
Scott says Postgres does it as well.
Yeah, but I don't know if it does the key. But it makes sense though. If you're trying to insert into it, you don't want to roll back the key ID in case another one's trying to do it, and then it's gonna, possible clashes and stuff. But yeah. So anyway, that was a blog post sort of talking about that one he found. But I'm wondering which version it affects too. And I don't really care about the auto increment key, like if it goes up or not. Why would that matter if one of the keys are missing? And I guess is my thing.
Yeah, because the example here, and I found on mysqltutorial.org, makes a bit more sense because it's like inserting in like 5 rows, and it's saying what if 2 of the 5 error, right? As opposed to rolling back the entire transaction, well, you get 3 inserted and the 2 just disappear into the ether. And so presumably you have gaps now in your, primary key, which maybe your app design assumes won't happen. I would hate to ever make that assumption because it seems like you regularly have gaps in a primary key.
Yeah, and so Scott was saying in terms of the auto increment part, it does do it as well, but on conflict has more features than Postgres, like on duplicate key update or whatever. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I've used it before where I've had race conditions where basically I have data that's getting inserted, and for whatever reason, it's the same data getting multiple submissions at the same time. And so I know the second and third one at the exact same instant, I can just ignore. But when I put that insert ignore into it, it also screwed up other things, basically with error. So you never get any response back about any errors, which is bad. So I had to change my code, but, I just need to put a lock around it. That's the easy way to do it, but I was just being lazy. So that's when I ran into that. Anyways,
laziness is the sign of a good developer.
Yep, to a certain degree, until it bites you in the butt, and then you change your mind. And then last but not least, Grant Copley had a tweet, and he said, we've got 3 videos up on CFCasts if you want to learn about building apps with CBWire, totally free. And then he puts the link up here. So I'll share the link here. I've got to go back and share some more of these other things, but CBWire, yeah, there's a few videos already up there and free. So if I share my screen here, you guys can see. So we got a couple of different webinars and Into the Box 2021 and the Ortus single video series, how to get up and running with it. So if you guys are looking to use CBWire or want to learn more about it, there's a few videos up there and they're already free. So pretty neat. Okay, and then I'll post a couple more of those other links. Sorry guys, I got distracted, too busy arguing with Brad about stuff. Constructive discussion, more like, but yep. So there's a few more links in here for you all. Okay, so find a job. CFMLjobs.com has probably the best way to find Cold Fusion jobs, I think, because it scrapes them from everywhere. So you can see we got an enterprise sales account manager from India, and we have a Lucee Cold Fusion developer freelance in Belgium, England, and we have a few other positions too that were remote as well. So from last week, but 135 jobs listed, I think, in the last few months. Pretty good way to get into the job market there. I think they scrape almost all of the big ones. It's very few that doesn't seem to show up there, from what I can tell. So, but another thing too is Ortus is hiring. So if you want to have an interview conversation with Brad, because he seems to harass all the applicants, Ortus is hiring another USA senior CFML developer. So we're looking for people, and most importantly, the US time zone availability is a must, and the U.S. citizen or resident or work visa is a must. So since you interview them, Brad, any hints or tips on how they can make it past you?
Nothing can prepare you.
Good answer. So yeah, so if you guys are looking, check out the Order Solutions site as well. Means in command box. Yeah, say command box is nowhere near as good as Node, and that'll definitely get you through the next interview. Yeah, for sure.
I will warn you, if you're looking at a senior developer position in Ortus, we are expecting someone with some amount of box product experience or an insatiable desire to learn.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'll say too. I don't know if you guys have noticed or anything, but most Ortus people are pretty passionate. So they're basically, you can't get away from them, right? Like the Brads, you can't hide from them. The Gavins, you can't hide from them. Eric, everywhere you look, there's one of us popping up. And then, like some of the newer team members too, like Michael Bourne and Daniel Garcia, like they're everywhere. That's just the way we are. We're lifetime learners, always pushing. And so, that's something. It's like the people with the passion that might not have the experience, they're going to get there. They're going to push hard. They're going to learn. They're going to strive to do what they can. And so those people are, the best employees. So, even if you're not the most experienced with box products or anything else, doesn't mean you can't make it. But that passion, I think, is a big plus. And it might just be a bit of Luisa, the El Salvadorian passion burns bright. But it seems to be a good, success indicator too. Those who have the passion and the drive seem to outweigh those who have the experience. Because you can always learn, right? But you can't fake that. So, yeah, the command box chest tattoo might win, though. That's some serious passion right there. A little bit of stupidity, but, anyway. Okay, moving on. So, ForgeBox module of the week. And which one is it this week, Brad?
It is CB Scribe, or CF Scribe, sorry.
Yep. So,
we talked about it in the keynote of Into the Box. Sorry, I'm typing something in the chat right now.
Yep, and Dan Card, the man behind CF Scribe, is also in the chat. But yeah, CF Scribe is a pretty cool thing, and it's built on, is it John Wilson's? He'll have to correct me. But I think
it was with his project. Basically, Logbox has the ability to kind of, decide what appenders the messages flow through to. but it's somewhat limited in just how you can configure it. And so CF Scribe acts as a logbox appender that has a whole bunch of routing mechanisms inside of it to decide where the actual log messages go to. Um, and so to answer your question, Scott, no, I don't believe it's ColdBox specific. I could be wrong about that, but since it's mostly based around Logbox, I would assume it just requires Logbox. But yeah, you can base stuff on like the environment, HTTP headers, ColdBox settings, system like environment variables, UDFs, just to really fine tune what log messages go where inside your application. And it was
Yeah,
basically driven right out of a client project.
yeah, and I like it. I mean, it's very much it's sort of logbox you sort of configure on application start, where CF Scribe is configured on each request, and that's sort of the point of it is that every request can be treated differently, and so I really like that approach. I do something very similar with CP mail services for like our staging stuff. So we have environment variables that basically say, okay, this is the list of people that these emails can go to. This is a list of emails that every message must go to. This is a bunch of topics that we can send. This is the prefixes for certain environments, and it's basically environment rules that get implemented on a per request basis with an interceptor. And so I'm like, I might just steal whatever he builds with this and just convert it to CP mail, so I have more of a user interface and have a provider-based setup. So, but yeah, it's pretty neat because sometimes you need that flexibility. And so, it can tell, is this an API request or a normal Cold Fusion, lifecycle request? So, I really like it. So, the link for that is in the chat. And yeah, if you have a ticket for ITB, you can go watch the session and the pre-conference, which was really cool. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until Christmas time for the 12 videos of Christmas from ITB. But yeah, so good job with that, Dan. But yeah, it does leverage Logbox extensively, and I think he said that right now it does work on ColdBox, but he's working on getting it running. So you just need Logbox without ColdBox, but that's on the roadmap. So cool. VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. So this one
I'm already
here.
reading ahead here.
Yeah, I know. What's going on? I'm not sure if I can handle this. Brad's almost prepared. So this one here, we actually spotlighted this one, I think, 3 years ago. So I thought it was a worthy one to re-establish because 3 years ago it had like 100,000 installs, and now it has like almost 500,000 installs. But this gives you a bunch of really useful, very friendly file management tools right inside of VS Code. And so sometimes it works pretty nicely. VS Code natively, but with the command palette you can do a lot more things. You can, close folders, delete, duplicate, move, open, recent, rename. But I thought this was pretty cool. You also can do brace expansion. So when you
That's something I've wanted to add to command box for a while. Something that Bash does.
So yeah, in the file name input, if you do /temp/ and then do parentheses and do like curly's a, b, c, curly /index dot, and then cpp, ts, scss curly's, what it does is it basically will loop through the curly brace ones, and so then it creates you a temp/ folder for A, B, and C, and inside of that it makes a file for index, cpp, SCSS, and TS. So it generates them all for all of them. So I was like, this could be really cool for scaffolding out stuff. And I wonder if we could use that on top of other stuff we're already using in command box to like scaffold out things. Instead of just creating one controller, we could basically have, like 5 or 6 handlers being generated based on this convention. You could basically give it the different names of it with curly braces, and it'll loop through and give you multiples or something. Anyway.
Basically, it creates the Cartesian product of both sets, or all sets, rather.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So that was one thing. And then obviously you've got the normal commands in here and some configuration. But yeah, it works pretty nicely, and a lot of people have been using it for a while. And John Clausen recommended this one, and he says it's like one of the must-haves for VS Code. So I thought that was worth reminding people of how cool it is.
Is this extension used solely from the little command palette where you type commands?
I don't know if it actually adds things into your normal menu. I think I actually have it installed, and I have had it installed for 3 or 4 years now, so I don't even know which ones are native and which ones aren't anymore. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, because I'm just sitting here watching the little animated GIF, and it looks like everything they're doing is with the command palette. So just curious.
Yeah, I know there's one at least that does add additional functionality to your right-click context menu, but I don't know. That thing is so many cool VS Code hints and tips, but we'll try and bring them all back up. 'Cause whatever I do is usually I reinstall fresh every once in a while and just put on the ones I know I need. That way I can see what's actually native, because sometimes the extensions we used to use aren't needed anymore because VS Code does a lot of that now too.
Yeah, you got to watch out if you go crazy installing all of the extensions in the world. They'll start to bog down VS Code. I installed like a VS Code update yesterday, and it restarted like 10 VS Code windows, and it just like hammered my CPU for like 3 minutes. And I was like, what the heck? And I looked at my Windows Task Manager, and I had this Red Hat Java extension that was running some Java process in like each of those VS Code windows as they were starting up. And I was like, what the heck? So I went and I disabled that extension, and all of a sudden VS Code got a lot faster. So there can be a downside to just installing every single extension you come across if they add overhead to the startup time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when you're running multiple windows. And maybe we can talk about the project manager next week, and then help you switch windows easier. So anyway, that's our VS Code hint tip trick of the week, file utils. Last but not least, let's thank all of our Patreon supporters, because without them we wouldn't be able to do all the awesome things we're doing. So we have obviously a lot of cool little perks out there for you. If you're a bronze or up, you get ForgeBox Pro and CFCasts subscriptions as a perk for your Patreon subscription. All Patreon supporters have profile badges on the community website, and they also have access to their private forum on the community website. We started a box team Slack to discuss a few more things that we thought were Patreon-only discussions, including some ideas for other types of things, like the Coding with the Kiwi and Friends that I did, late summer, and what we may want to do going forward. So we're trying to plan out for everything after CF Summit, because conference season is almost over. Trying to see what we can do going forward for you guys. So jump into the Slack, and of course the community.ortusolutions.com. Everybody should be on there anyway, Patreon or not. But we got a large list of patrons here. I think we got 41 names here, Brad. So I think it's on you, since you missed last week.
What? Okay. So thank you to our impeccable Patreon today. John Wilson from Synaptrix, Jordan Clark, Gary Knight, Mario Rodriguez, Giancarlo Gomez, David Bellinger, Dan Card, Jonathan Perrott, Jeffrey McGee from Sunstar Media, Dean Maunder, Nolan Irk, Abdul Rahim, Bill Dubrine, Joseph Lamory, Don Bellamy, Jan Yannick, Laxma Turtohadi, Brian Gadelli from Haggerty Motorsports, Carl von Stetten, Jeremy Adams, Peter Lesnicki, Matthew Clemente, Daniel Garcia, Scott Steinbeck from Dragon Systems, Ben Adele, Richard Herbert, Brett DeLine, Kai Koenig, Charlie Earhart, Jason Diger, Sean Oden, Matthew Darby, Ross Phillips, Edgardo Cabezas, Patrick Flynn, Stephanie Monkey, Kevin Wright, John Wish, Peter Amiri, and Gavin Brad. So I actually get to meet Into the Box. He was in my test box training.
Cool.
So thank you to our impeccable Patreon supporters.
Yep, we appreciate each and every one of you. And again, we couldn't do these podcasts without you, so we appreciate it. And if you are going to be at CF Summit, please come up and introduce yourself. It is nice to meet you guys and chit-chat a little bit. So thanks, everybody. And Brad, you have a good week. Get everything done we need to get done, and then we'll see you Sunday at CF Summit.
Yeah, I should finish my session.
Finished? You mean start? I know you've done that one before, so you should be good.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk about something you're already really familiar with, because you just have to figure out what order to say it all in.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
All right.
Have a good one, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernizeordie.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.